Hey, what's going on? In this video, I'm going to be forging out an 8-inch chef knife from a billet of 228 layer Damascus steel that I made in a previous video. I made this Damascus billet from alternating layers of 1084 and 15-20 steel. Before I get started forging, I want to make sure that all of my seams are ground out and I don't have any cold shuts hiding in the billet. I start by pressing in the tip of the blade and then fine-tuning things on the anvil. Next, I'll move on to the other end of the knife and isolate some material for the handle. Here I'm working on thinning out the spine of the knife and forging in a distal taper from the handle to the tip. Next I'll work the bevels and you'll see the blade profile take its final shape. I didn't give myself enough handle material, so now I'll need to work this front choil into the blade to extend the handle. Now that the blade's all forged out, I'll clean up the profile on the grinder. Lastly, I'll stamp it with my maker's mark. If you're hot stamping, make sure to use a different hammer so you don't mar up the faces of your forging hammers. I use this cheap 4-pound cross peen from Harbor Freight. I did a quick anneal and let the blade cool slowly in the forge over a couple hours. This gets the steel soft enough to make drilling holes in the handle pretty easy. I like to chamfer all of my handle holes to reduce the risk of a crack in the quench. I'm going to run 3 normalization cycles in the kiln at 1650, 1500, and 1400 degrees Fahrenheit. This helps to evenly distribute the carbides in the steel and reduce the grain size. I'm going to quench the blade at 1475 degrees Fahrenheit in Parks 50 quench oil that is heated to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. After quenching, I tempered the blades for 2 2-hour cycles at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. This will give me a hardness of around 59 to 60 Rockwell, which I think works well for a multi-purpose chef knife. It's really easy to overheat your knife when grinding and ruin the temper on the blade. This will create soft spots in the steel and can give you weird results like excessive edge rolling, warping, and uneven edge wear. By not wearing gloves when you grind, and especially keeping a finger on the tip, you can make sure nothing is getting too hot to affect the performance of the steel. This blade easily skates a 55 Rockwell file, and the 60 Rockwell file is just barely digging in. Using a guillotine paper cutter like this seems to be the most efficient way to cut strips of sandpaper that I've found. Let me know in the comments if you have any other creative ways to do this. I alternate the direction of sanding strokes between grits so that I can ensure that I've thoroughly removed all of the previous grit scratches. I took this blade up to a 1000 grit finish. Before etching the blade in ferric chloride, I wash the blade with dish soap and water, then degrease the blade again with brake cleaner, and then rinse it in water before going into the acid. With my concentration of ferric chloride, I do 3 5-minute etch cycles, and in between cycles I sand with progressively higher grit sandpaper, 1500, 2000, and 2500 grit for this knife. Lastly, I do a coffee etch for around 2 hours. This gives a really dark etch on the 1084 and gives good contrast in the pattern. For some reason I thought this picture was deep enough for this knife. Clearly it's not, and I'll move it to a bigger container. After the coffee etch, I neutralize the acid by submerging the knife in some baking soda water and then rinse it in warm water. Next, I blow the blade dry with the air compressor, and I'm careful at this point to not touch the blade with anything until I've given the dark black oxides time to set for several hours. Once the oxides are set, I polish up the knife with the sunshine cloth. This basically polishes the 15N20 and doesn't affect the dark 1084. Here's a look at the set of desert ironwood handle scales that I'm going to put on this knife. I run my thumb over the scales after each pass on the grinder to make sure that the wood isn't getting too hot. It's really easy to burn the wood on the grinder, especially at higher grits. I took this up to 120 grit on the belt grinder and then 400 grit by hand. I'm going to clean up the surface of the tang with some 120 grit sandpaper before gluing up the handle. I'll clean everything with some acetone before applying any epoxy. I'm using Total Boat Medium Epoxy. There's a link to this product and many of the other tools and materials I use in my videos in the video description and also on my website, davidmoonforge.com, under the product links tab. With ironwood scales, I like to add black color pigment to the epoxy. This really blends in well with the natural grain of the wood. I'll let that cure overnight in the clamps before shaping the handle. I get asked a lot on Damascus knives why I don't etch the spine and tang of the knife. I guess it's just personal preference. I like to shape my handles after everything is glued up because I like the seamless feel. I've done knives in the past where I shape the scales off the knife and then glue everything up, and it seems like you can always catch a fingernail somewhere that isn't quite a perfect fit. I also don't really like etching the tang after the handle is glued and shaped because I'm not confident that there isn't some small crevice or hole that could pull the acid down into the handle with no real way to neutralize it. Maybe that's overthinking things, but it's just the way I like to do it. If a customer really wanted a Damascus knife with the spine etched, I would probably just recommend doing a hidden tang knife instead. I've got a few small voids in the wood that I'll fill with some Starbond CA glue. I use black with ironwood because you can't really even notice it once it's cured and sanded. A little spray with the activator has it ready to sand in about a minute or so. I took this handle up to a 400 grit finish. I'm going to apply 3 coats of Odie's oil for a finish, and I give it at least 12 hours between coats. The best way to apply Odie's oil is to pretend like you're trying to wipe all the oil off the wood as opposed to applying it. You want as thin of coats as possible. Now I'm going to apply a food-safe blade wax to really get the Damascus pattern to pop and also protect the knife from moisture and rust in transit. I'll sharpen the knife on a set of diamond stones at a 20-degree angle. I'm using a 300, 1200, and 3000 grit stone. Right about here, I cut the absolute crap out of my finger. It's a great idea to keep a first aid kit in your shop. I use mine a lot. I got my finger cleaned and bandaged and back to work. I sent pictures of this to a nurse and firefighter friends of mine to ask them if I should have gotten stitches for the cut, and they both gave me a resounding yes. Maybe next time. I stropped the blade on a double-sided leather strop that's loaded with 5 micron and 3.5 micron diamond paste. It easily shaves hair and cuts pretty smoothly through paper. Thanks for watching.